There are nights that arrive like a thunderclap inside a quiet poem. One sudden sound that forces everyone to reread the lines they thought they knew. Madison Square Garden, February 4th, 2012. The Knicks and Nets are in a sloppy, bruising grind. The crowd is restless, the roster is thin, and a bench guard nobody in New York really remembered an hour earlier walks onto the court and begins to rewrite the evening.
Jeremy Lin drives and finishes. Nice play from Lin.
He dribbles through traffic, converts impossible finishes, threads passes that look like intuition, and when the final buzzer sounds, the scoreboard reads his name in a way it had never done before.
Again, the crossover, the basket, puts it up, puts it in. Jeremy Lin with 25.
The Garden chants it. Spike Lee is on his feet. The internet freezes. Jeremy Lin didn't just have a good game that night, he turned a city's doubt into a fever. That week would become Linsanity. That single night is a hook that makes you look back and understand everything that came before it. The undrafted humiliation, the overtime flights, the D-League minutes, the film room repetitions, the private grinds that make an improbable public miracle feel, in retrospect, inevitable. To tell that story in any real way, you must treat the moment as punctuation and the life as the paragraph that gives it meaning. Jeremy Lin was born August 23, 1988, in Torrance, California, to Taiwanese immigrant parents. He learned to play on the quiet courts of Palo Alto, where there were no five-star camps and no national pipelines, only patient reps and a rare basketball IQ shaped by reading before athleticism. At Harvard, he averaged 16.4 points per game, led the Ivy League in scoring, and played like someone who balanced craft with curiosity. But the NBA's modern machinery didn't have a clear slot for that biography. Lin went undrafted in 2010 and began the kind of professional life that tests a person's conviction. A summer league invite, a Warriors contract, a D-League assignment, a short stint in China during the lockout, and a series of signings that looked more like survival than arrival. Those are the kind of biographies that either harden a player into something useful or break them against the world's indifference. Lin chose the first option. There's a logic to how legend appears in modern basketball. For most of the league's history, spectacular runs were explained by dominance or invention. Jordan's clutch efficiency, Bird's cold blood, Kobe's obsession. Linsanity was different because it wasn't the long march of elite consensus. It was a compressed eruption. For 11 consecutive games in early 2012, he averaged 23.9 points and 9.2 assists, a run that terrorized defenses and enchanted casual viewers. The streak forced coaches to produce new scouting pages and forced commentators to re-examine the categories they'd used to file him. Harvard graduate, undrafted, Asian American, bench guard turned overnight star. Each label carried weight, some cultural, some tactical. And the collision of them is where Linsanity became more than basketball. It became a story about possibility. The electrical charge of those days is easy to summarize and hard to replicate. On February 10th, 2012, he scored 38 points against the Lakers in Los Angeles. And it felt like a message, because this was not a hollow expansion of minutes. This was a kid standing toe-to-toe with Kobe Bryant on his home floor and forcing a legend to acknowledge an apprentice. Kobe's reaction, raw, respectful, immutably expanded the moment. Each game in that stretch folded into the next like Russian dolls.
And it lays it in. And listen to this Garden crowd on this 10-0 run.
A miracle rep they could slot into highlight reels, a headline that fed the feed, and a city that suddenly imagined its own hero. The meaning of the run lay not just in box scores, but in the cultural echoes that rippled outward. Lin jerseys, sold-out arenas, an Asian American presence in mainstream sports commentary that felt historic. If Linsanity is the hook, the real story is the long rewind, the accumulation of tiny deferrals and quiet discipline. Lin's game was never a straight line of athletic explosion. He operated inside a different grammar. Precise footwork, a sense for spacing born from film study, a left-handed finishing touch that exploited tiny angles, and an ability to find teammates when defenses collapsed. He carved danger out of precision rather than pure burst. In coaching rooms, people called him a conductor. On the floor, he played like a conductor who'd learned to improvise when his section fell out of tune. That temperament, calm improvisation, is what let him morph myth into repeated reality, even if the mythology burned bright only briefly. The arc after the Garden is as instructive as the run itself. Fame in sport is double-edged. When the city becomes your crucible, the environment reorganizes around you. Endorsement deals, national interviews, the pressure of expectation. For Lin, the consequences came quick. Mike D'Antoni's Knicks were a team in search of rhythm. The emergence of Linsanity rearranged roles and egos. Carmelo Anthony and Lin's chemistry never smoothed into a perfect marriage. The Knicks made trades, D'Antoni resigned, and the franchise responded to the newfound attention with short-term solutions that undercut the fragile arrangement that had made Lin's run possible. The crisis inside the Knicks is a cautionary tale. Sometimes the moment requires an ecosystem, and when the ecosystem fractures, the moment can evaporate. To understand Lin's career, you must examine the long roster map he traversed afterwards, not as failure, but as the modern itinerant pro's life. He moved to Houston and reunited with his old mentor coaches. He signed with the Lakers, where he briefly faced Kobe again. He became a reliable veteran in Charlotte and Brooklyn, and years later, he joined the Hawks before landing with Toronto for the 2018-19 stretch. He was the kind of player teams signed when they needed an experienced hand around younger guards or when they needed spacing and veteran instincts on a playoff push. That journeyman pathway is a storied NBA archetype. Players who become perennials, not by sustained superstar peaks, but by adaptability. Lin was that, a chameleon who could serve as a starter in one context and an invaluable off-ball spark in another. There are technical strands worth isolating because they explain why opponents sometimes panicked and why coaches kept calling his number first, his touch and finishing. Lin's ability to contort his body and use angles made him deceptive in traffic. He used a left-hand floater and a torqued layup that were hard to replicate. Second, his pick-and-roll IQ. Lin could locate a rolling big or bait a help defender into the wrong lane, then deliver an on-target pass. Third, his late clock calm. Where many young guards hurry, he compartmentalized the possession into micro-decisions. Stop, read, exploit. That last trait is an underrated skill in playoff basketball. Late clock possessions are won less by athleticism than by the discipline to make the immediate correct choice. Lin had that discipline. That is why he could string together moments that felt improbable, but were on tape practice made visible. Comparisons are inevitable because viewers crave frameworks. In the modern era, a breakout like Lin's sits somewhere between a Derek Fisher 0.4 and a Manu Ginobili improvisation. Fisher's career is the slow burn of reliability that culminates in a single, famous frame. Manu's is the artful mischief that reshapes games with craft. Lin's flash is different. It's the spotlighted phoenix, sudden, bright, culturally disruptive. Compare Lin to Steph Curry and you see tone shifts. Curry's shooting revolution changed schemes over years. Lin's run was compressed into weeks and changed thinking about representation and the power of narrative. Compare him to Klay Thompson or Jamal Crawford, and the comparison lands on shot-making and heat tolerance. Each of these players has nights where rhythm turns into unstoppable fireworks. But where Lin's case diverges is the social ledger attached to his success. His identity carried the weight of representation, and that extra dimension amplified every bucket into cultural commentary. Those comparisons are not merely basketball talk, they are sociological lenses. The story is also a lesson in how the league's institutions can both elevate and mismanage rare moments. The Knicks' inability to provide a stable system post-Linsanity is a template repeated across franchises. When a surprise star emerges, organizations often scramble to reconfigure rosters and coaching philosophies, sometimes in ways that erode the very dynamics that produced the surge. Teams must decide whether to protect a fragile chemistry or to monetize the heat. The Knicks in 2012 leaned toward the latter. Lin's subsequent moves to Rockets, Lakers, Hornets, Nets, Hawks, Raptors reflect both his value and the league's churn. Teams valued his experience, his risk-free ball handling, and his capacity to be a culture-preserving veteran. They also tempered expectations by recognizing the athletic limitations that injuries would later accentuate. This is the managerial paradox of modern basketball. Do you double down on a hot player, or do you manage him as a valuable plug-in? The wrong answer can dissipate narrative momentum as quickly as hype created it. Culturally, Linsanity registered in ways far beyond the box score. For Asian American communities, it was not just sport, it was representation television shows, mainstream magazines, college campuses. Everyone riffed on the moment. Lin carried expectations that had little to do with wins and losses, and everything to do with identity and possibility. That is why the story's ripples reached commerce, media, and politics. It's also why the pressure was so particular. Where a typical breakout might invite envy, Lin's invited lectures on race, representation, and stereotype busting. That burden is invisible in highlight reels, but heavy in interviews and locker room life. When sports become culture, the athlete becomes a de facto public figure with responsibilities and attacks that the pure athlete does not face. Lin navigated those storms with the same humility he used to navigate defenses. If you watch the tape of his Knicks run closely, you'll see something else that matters for long-form storytelling: the way teammates and opponents react. Coaches reconfigure matchups to force him into uncomfortable spots. Defenders try to bait him into predictable moves. Teammates learn to space differently. The real analytical test of a moment's permanence is whether the adjustments hold. In Lin's case, some defenses found counters once they had film. Physical hedges, length on the pick and roll, and crowding the baseline to take away his favored drives. Lin's ability to respond to these changes determined whether his runs could recur. Sometimes he adjusted, sometimes injuries and organizational churn prevented full adaptation. That's the practical basketball truth. Moments can be repeated if the player, the coach, and the institution commit to learning simultaneously. There are darker themes too, because fame eats privacy. Lin endured microaggressions and overt racism in the press and online. He faced doubters who used his Harvard education as a cudgel, smart but soft, and he had to battle both the statistical and the cultural narratives that wished to frame him as an anomaly rather than an athlete. Those adversarial moments amplified his mental load during a period when every possession became historic. He carried that weight publicly and continued to perform professionally. For younger players watching, especially minority athletes, the lesson was tangible. Attainment can create both vindication and additional layers of expectation. How you carry that extra gravity matters. Lin carried it with a studied calm. We should not romanticize the end of his NBA arc as failure. After 2012, his career became the blueprint of modern durability. He reinvented himself as a veteran mentor, a reliable rotational guard, and a professional who helped develop young talents. In Atlanta, he came to mentor Trae Young. In Brooklyn and Charlotte, he stabilized backcourts. In Toronto, he provided depth for a title-contending roster. Importantly, Lin was part of the 2019 Toronto Raptors organization that won the franchise's first NBA championship. Even if his court minutes were limited, he earned the ring and, crucially, became the first Asian American player to be associated with an NBA championship roster in the modern media era. That fact closed a loop. The kid who ignited Madison Square Garden became part of a complete championship arc, a symbolic continuity that mattered to fans and communities. There is an aesthetic that Lin's career left behind. Beyond the cultural noise and the statistical windows, he left a blueprint for how an undersized, undrafted guard can use intelligence, craft, and opportunism to create impact young players in gymnasiums across the world, in Taiwan, in California, in Shanghai. Watch his moves, replicate his footwork, and tell themselves that the path to the NBA need not be traditional. That's legacy in the technical sense, changes in training, in scouting, and in the imaginations of a generation. Linsanity was not merely a viral phenomenon, it was a pedagogical moment. Coaches added new clips to film rooms. International scouting took deeper notice of Ivy League players and the CBA. Players studied his ability to convert small margins into scoring chances. When influence becomes practice, you know a career has changed the sport. How will history place Jeremy Lin? Not as a Jordan-type demigod, not as a decade-long statistical monarch, but as a symbol of what the league can be at its most human and surprising. His story lives in two registers: the dramatic compression of February 2012, which offered pure spectacle and culturally decisive image, and the longer narrative of persistence, adaptability, and mentorship that followed. Both are necessary to understand him. The flash without the follow-through is trivia. The follow-through without the flash is a respectable career. Together they form a life that mattered on the court and off it. If you ask for an image to close on, don't pick the Garden's roar or the sold-out jersey lines alone. Pick the film of Jeremy Lin years later, standing in a quiet gym, coaching a younger player on how to use an angle, how to sell a pump fake, how to protect a teammate's confidence with a calming word. That small scene, intimate, unbroadcast without camera flourishes, is the heart of his legacy. It compresses the largest truth Linsanity taught us, that the most viral miracles are often the visual finales of long, unglamorous work. He showed the world what sudden possibility looks like. Then he taught the next generation how to build the conditions for it. For that, the moment in Madison Square Garden is only the headline. The whole story, the long accumulation, the migrations, the mentorship, the cultural meaning, is the book. And that book still sits on shelves people will return to whenever a new, improbable hero appears in the gym after midnight and thinks, maybe this is my night.